Will this be the year that Jim Harbaugh finally overcomes those Ohio State bucknuts and makes his ass clown satellite camps relevant again? Or will Jim Harbaugh once again lose to Ohio State and Michigan State in the same year? And will this cost Jim Harbaugh his job if he does lose to Ohio State yet again? Stay tuned to find out. Well, what do we have here? It's another day in college football land with all you guys and gals in sporting land. And this is the home of the Common Joe and Common Sally in the Know, even more so than all those media talking heads. And I am JPC, and I am your college football outlaw. I am the guy that will get on here and take a bullet for every single one of y'all. Now, getting right to it. Today I'd like to talk about Ohio State versus Michigan. You know, what is considered probably the biggest rivalry of all time up north and in the Big Ten. This game has a lot of ramifications this year. In past years, Ohio State has dominated this rivalry this century, and for the most part, and I think maybe Michigan's won maybe twice, maybe 3 times this century. Not many times. It's a rivalry that has gone by the wayside, almost like the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry, but not quite as bad, because at least Michigan is still somewhat relevant and in the discussion throughout the year as far as a national contender and top 10 finishes. And this year is no different. Michigan is in the top 10. They're in position to possibly even go to the playoffs if they were to upset those Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, Jim Harbaugh, I wasn't a fan of as much at first. When he first came in, he said some things and made some little innuendos towards Nick Saban that I did not appreciate too much. But as I got to know Jim Harbaugh, and he's a pretty weird cat, he just has something about him that just grows on you, you know? The whole ass clown satellite camps thing that I made fun of was considered cutting edge when he came in. You had people like Paul Feinbaum tooting his horn, talking about this is the new wave, this is the guy that's going to come in and take out Nick Saban and take out Urban Meyer. And now, you know, when Urban Meyer left, they said, you know, that's Jim Harbaugh now. It's really going to be his time because Urban Meyer's gone. But then Ryan Day just picks up the baton and continues on with great success at Ohio State, which is hard to do. It's hard to come in behind a guy that's very successful. Normally don't work out that way. Normally when you follow somebody that's very successful or a legend, you end up being in a situation that's a pretty tight situation. You end up getting pushed out. But Ryan Day has not done that. Ryan Day's took the bull by the horns, and he's been quite successful at Ohio State. Now, he hasn't won a national championship yet, but he has continued winning Big Ten titles. And in Ohio State circles, sometimes that's just as important as winning a national championship because, you know, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 for the longest time were tied up with the Rose Bowl, and the Rose Bowl is the only thing they cared about. It's another topic for another day on that. But at the beginning of the year, and even in the preseason, I was telling my podcast partner, Jonathan Lewis, by the way, he has a great podcast called College Football with Jonathan Lewis. Check that out. I was talking to him earlier in the year in preseason. He's been giving me hell about this all year because I said I thought that this was finally going to be Jim Harbaugh's year. He was finally going to get over the Ohio State hump. I thought Ohio State may have been slightly overrated. And as they started the year, they struggled against Minnesota and they lost to Oregon. And it sort of made me look somewhat prophetic. I looked like I was feeling pretty good about it. But then Ohio State has sort of came on. C.J. Stroud has came into his own. He's had to get his feet wet and get his feet under him, and he's finally done that. And he looks like he's coming around. Looks like their offense is pretty much gelling. But the thing is with Ohio State, and it seemed like this all year, and another buddy of mine that's associated with Jonathan, Aaron Parks, check him out as well. He was talking about the fact that Ohio State's offense, while it is a great offense, has ran its numbers up against some porous defenses to sort of be misleading. Now, that's not to say that Ohio State's not going to go in and score between 24 and 31 points on Michigan's defense. I'm not saying they won't. What I am saying is that Ohio State's defense may not be up to the task either. And I don't think that Ohio State's offense, as great as it is going to be able to run up 56 points or 49 points in the first half against Michigan like they did Michigan State. Now, I do realize that Michigan State did beat Michigan, but you can't do comparative scores and comparisons. That shit's never worked. Don't know why people do it. Because, of course, just a good example. This past week, Alabama beat Arkansas. Arkansas beat Texas A&M, and Texas A&M beat Alabama. So, if you do comparatives, then you're assuming that since Arkansas beat Texas A&M and Texas A&M beat Alabama, that Arkansas should beat Alabama. But that's not the way it is. And that's why it don't work that way. We also know in that game, in my opinion, that Michigan State got somewhat lucky. They were down by 16 points. They came back. They had a monstrous game out of Kenny Walker. Ended up rushing for 5 touchdowns and over 190 yards, I think. And they come back and beat Michigan. If that game had never happened, then this game right now would be considered epic. I mean, this would be a game that might decide, it might end up having 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff regardless of winner or loser. But because Michigan lost that game to Michigan State, now Jim Harbaugh is back in the precarious situation that he's been in for the last 2 or 3 years. And that is, he may get swept by his 2 main rivals again. He's won games. He's won 8, 9, 10 games a year, but he cannot beat his 2 main rivals. And my question is, if he does lose this game to Ohio State, will the Michigan brass have the balls to fire this guy when he's winning 9 or 10 games a year? I don't know if I would do that. But there again, you got to beat your main rivals. And when you're a big-time player like Michigan, just winning 7 or 8 games a year is not enough. Sad but true, but that's just the way it is with major college football. And if you're considered a traditional power, winning 7 or 8 games a year, every year, sometimes ain't enough to keep your job. So, with that being said, I think the key to this game is obviously the quarterback, C.J. Stroud. If C.J. Stroud gets pressured, and there hasn't been a lot of pressure really applied to C.J. Stroud in the last few weeks against some of these Big Ten defenses. Michigan defense is a lot better, and that's where I think that they can be had. If they can just put some pressure on C.J. Stroud and not allow him all the time in the world to sit back there, make a sandwich, and brush his hair, brush his teeth, and then throw the ball downfield to Olave or whatever his name is, and them score a touchdown and score 49 points and a half, I think Michigan State can not only stay in this game, but I think Michigan could win this game and maybe even by a couple of scores. It's already going to be considered an upset if they win. But if they can put pressure on C.J. Stroud and Ohio State has to revert to the running game somewhat, I think this could be the year that Michigan and Jim Harbaugh finally overcome Ohio State. And it's probably a good thing that Ohio State didn't tank a little bit this year like I thought they would, because by Jim Harbaugh beating a good Ohio State team that's on the verge of a playoff berth and possibly knocking them out and putting themselves in the playoffs, this would be the game that would probably give Jim at least, 2 or 3 more years collateral unless he starts losing again to him. And it could get him over the hump. And if you get Jim Harbaugh over the hump, he's won everywhere he's been, by the way. This guy could turn into a national championship coach, in my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like him. He's a weird cat, but he does some funny shit. Not so much like Ed Orgeron, Les Miles, where it's just spastic and people in the media just want to push it because, they want to see them beat certain teams. like Alabama. I think that this is the game that could finally determine what's going to happen with Jim Harbaugh going forward with the Ohio State Buckeyes, as much as I hate to admit it. So, if I was going to give a score on this game, I think, like I said, if they can pressure this quarterback and keep him from having all this time in the world to throw these great receivers, I think Michigan can pull this game out. I think they can pull the upset. Jim Harbaugh gets over the hump. Maybe they go to the Big Ten title game, beat Wisconsin, and finally, Michigan has made it to the college football playoff. And I think the score will be something like Michigan 31 and Ohio State 23. You guys and gals tell me what you think about this game, who you think is going to win, what do you think the key points are for Ohio State and Michigan. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. And as always, KMCA.